A fishing rod is a long, flexible rod used to catch fish. At its simplest, a fishing rod is a simple stick or pole attached to a line ending in a hook. The length of the rod can vary between 2 and 20 feet. To entice fish, bait lures are impaled on one or more hooks attached to the line. The line is generally stored on a reel, which reduces tangles and assists in landing a fish. Traditionally, rods are made from bamboo, while contemporary rods are usually made from fiberglass or carbon fiber. In contrast with nets, which are usually used in subsistence and commercial fishing, fishing rods are more often used in recreational fishing and competitive casting. Fishing rods come in many sizes, actions, lengths and configurations depending on whether they are to be used for small, medium or large fish or in different fresh or saltwater situations. Various types of fishing rods are designed for specific types of fishing. Fly rods are used to cast artificial flies. Spinning rods and bait casting rods are designed to cast baits or lures. Ice fishing rods are designed to fish through small holes in ice-covered lakes. Trolling rods are designed to drag bait or lures behind moving boats. History. Judging by stone inscriptions dating back to 2000 BC, fishing rods go back to ancient Egypt, China, Greece, Trinidad and Tobago, Roman medieval England. Fly fishing. The art of fly fishing took a great leap forward after the English Civil War, where a newly found interest in the activity left its mark on the many books and treatises that were written on the subject at the time. The renowned officer in the Parliamentary Army, Robert Venables, published in 1662 The Experienced Angler, or Angling Improved, being a general discourse of angling, imparting many of the aptest ways and choicest experiments for the taking of most sorts of fish in pond or river. Complete Angler was written by Isaac Walton in 1653 and described the fishing in the Derbyshire Wye. It was a celebration of the art and spirit of fishing in prose and verse. 6 verses were quoted from John Dennis's earlier work. A second part to the book was added by Walton's friend Charles Cottin. The 18th century was mainly an era of consolidation of the techniques developed in the previous century. Running rings began to appear along the fishing rods, which gave anglers greater control over the cast line. The rods themselves were also becoming increasingly sophisticated and specialized for different roles. Jointed rods became common from the middle of the century, and bamboo came to be used for the top section of the rod, giving it a much greater strength and flexibility. The industry also became commercialized. Rods and tackle were sold at the haberdasher's store. After the Great Fire of London in 1666, artisans moved to Redditch, which became a center of production of fishing-related products from the 1730s. Onesimus Eustason established his trading shop in 1761, and his establishment remained as a market leader for the next century. He received a royal warrant and became the official supplier of fishing tackle to 3 successive monarchs, starting with King George IV. Over this period, technological improvements. The impact of the Industrial Revolution was first felt in the manufacture of fly lines. Instead of anglers twisting their own lines, a laborious and time-consuming process, the new textile spinning machines allowed for a variety of tapered lines to be easily manufactured and marketed. The material used for the rod itself changed from the heavy woods native to England, to lighter and more elastic varieties imported from abroad, especially from South America and the West Indies. Bamboo rods became the generally favored option from the mid-19th century, and several strips of the material were cut from the cane, milled into shape, and then glued together to form light, strong, hexagonal rods with a solid core that were superior to anything that preceded them. Other materials used were Donkin bamboo, Calcutta reed, ashwood, hickory, ironwood, maple, lancewood, or Malacca cane. These products were light, tough, and pliable. Rods were generally made in three pieces called the butt, midsection, and tip. The butts were frequently made of maple, with board bottom. This butt outlasted several tops. Midsections were generally made from ironwood because it was a thicker, strong woods. Tips were generally made from bamboo for its elasticity, which could throw the bait further and more accurately. Handles and grips were generally of corkwood or wrapped cane. Many different types of glue held these sections together, most commonly Irish glue and bone glue. This was until Hilton glue, or cement glue, was introduced because of its waterproof qualities. Even today, Tonkin split bamboo rods are still popular in fly fishing. Until the mid-1800s, rods were generally made in England. This changed in 1846 when American Samuel Philippe introduced an imported fishing rod, the first 6 strips of Calcutta cane made in Bavaria, where Philippe was importing violins that he passed off as his own handwork. Split cane rods were later independently produced after Philippe started to sell the imported rods to a New York retailer, and then copied by Americans Charles Orvis, Hiram Leonard and Englishman William Hardy in the 1870s, and mass production methods made these rods accessible to the public. Horton Manufacturing Company first introduced an all-steel rod in 1913. These rods were heavy and flexible and did not satisfy many customers. The next big occurrence in fishing rods was the introduction of the fiberglass rod in the 1940s and was developed by Robert Gale and a Mr. Maguire. Boron and graphite rods came around in the 1960s and 1970s when the United States and United Kingdom invested considerable research into developing the new technologies. Hewitt and Hovald were the first to come up with a way to lay the fibers into the shape of a fishing rod by wrapping them around a piece of balsa wood. However, by 1977, boron fiber technology had been muscled out by the cheaper material graphite and was no longer competitive in the market. Rods for travelers were made with nickel-silver metal joints, or ferrules, that could be inserted into one another, forming the rod. Some of them were made to be used as a walking cane until needed for sport. Since the 1980s, with the advent of flexible, yet stiff graphite ferrules, travel rod technology has greatly advanced, and multi-piece travel rods that can be transported in a suitcase or backpack constitute a large share of the market. Modern design. In theory, an ideal rod should gradually taper from butt to tip, be tight in all its joints, and have a smooth, progressive taper, without dead spots. Modern design and fabrication techniques, along with advanced materials such as graphite, boron and fiberglass composites as well as stainless steel, have allowed rod makers to tailor both the shape and action of fishing rods for greater casting distance, accuracy, and fish-fighting qualities. Today, fishing rods are identified by the weight and action. Generally, there are 3 types of rods used today: graphite, fiberglass, and bamboo rods. Bamboo rods are the heaviest of the 3, but people still use it for its feel. Fiberglass rods are the heaviest of the new chemically made material rods. They are mostly popular with the new and young anglers, as well as anglers who cannot afford the generally more expensive graphite rods. They are more commonly found among those anglers that fish in rugged areas such as on rocks or piers, where potentially knocking the rod on hard objects is a greater possibility. This may potentially cause breakage, making a fiberglass rod more preferable for some anglers due to its higher durability and affordability compared to graphite rods. Today's most popular rod tends to be graphite for its lightweight characteristics characteristics and its ability to allow for further and more accurate cast. Graphite rods tend to be more sensitive, allowing the user to feel bites from fish easier. Modern fishing rods retain cork as a common material for grips. Cork is light, durable, keeps warm and tends to transmit rod vibrations better than synthetic materials, although EVA foam is also used. Reel seats are often of graphite, reinforced plastic, aluminium, or wood. Guides are available in steel and titanium with a wide variety of high-tech metal alloy inserts replacing the classic agate inserts of earlier rods. Back-about rests can also be used with modern fishing rods to make it easier to pull big fish off the water. These are fork-like supports that help keep the rod in position, providing leverage and counteracting tensions caused by caught fish. Rod-making bench. An old rod-making bench would generally consist of a 6 to 8 foot bench, vise, a drawing knife, a jack, a foreplane, large coarse flat file, sandpaper, and several strips of wood about 2 feet long with different size grooves in them. Specifications. There are several specifications manufacturers use to delineate rod uses. These include power, action, line weight, lure weight, and number of pieces. Power, also known as power value or rod weight. Rods may be classified as ultralight, light, medium, medium heavy, heavy, ultra heavy, or other similar combinations. Power is often an indicator of what types of fishing, species of fish, or size of fish a particular pole may be best used for. Ultralight rods are suitable for catching small bait fish and also panfish, or situations where rod responsiveness is critical. Ultra-heavy rods are used in deep-sea fishing, surf fishing, or for heavy fish by weight, while manufacturers use various designations for a rod's power. There is no fixed standard, hence application of a particular power tag by a manufacturer is somewhat subjective. Any fish can theoretically be caught with any rod, of course, but catching panfish on a heavy rod offers no sport whatsoever, and successfully landing a large fish on an ultralight rod requires supreme rod handling skills at best, and more frequently ends in broken tackle and a lost fish. Rods are best suited to the type of fishing they are intended for. Action refers to the speed with which the rod returns to its neutral position. An action may be slow, medium, fast, or anything in between, contrary to how it is often presented. Action does not refer to the bending curve. A rod with fast action can as easily have a progressive bending curve as a top-only bending curve. The action can be influenced by the tapering of the rod, the length and the materials used for the blank. Typically a rod which uses a glass fiber composite blank is slower than a rod which uses a carbon fiber composite blank. Action, however, is also often a subjective description of a manufacturer. Very often action is misused to note the bending curve instead of the speed. Some manufacturers list the power value of the rod as its action. A medium action bamboo rod may have a faster action than a fast fiberglass rod. Action is also subjectively used by anglers, as an angler might compare a given rod as faster or slower than a different rod. A rod's action and power may change when load is greater or lesser than the rod's specified casting weight. When the load used greatly exceeds a rod's specifications, a rod may break during casting if the line doesn't break first. When the load is significantly less than the rod's recommended range, the casting distance is significantly reduced, as the rod's action cannot launch the load. It acts like a stiff pole. In fly rods, exceeding weight ratings may warp the blank or have casting difficulties when rods are improperly loaded. Rods with a fast action, combined with a full progressive bending curve, allows the fisherman to make longer casts, given that the cast weight and line diameter is correct. When a cast weight exceeds the specifications slightly, a rod becomes slower, slightly reducing the distance. When a cast weight is slightly less than the specified casting weight, the distance is slightly reduced as well, as the rod action is only used partially. Bending curve tapering. A fishing rod's main function is to bend and deliver a certain resistance of power. While casting, the rod acts as a catapult. By moving the rod forward, the inertia of the mass of the bait, lure and amp rod itself will load the rod and launch the lure bait. When a bite is registered and the fisherman strikes, the bending of the rod will dampen the strike to avoid line failure. When fighting a fish, the bending of the rod not only enables the fisherman to keep the line under tension, but the bending of the rod will also keep the fish under a constant pressure, which will exhaust the fish and enable the fisherman to actually catch the fish. Also, the bending lessens the effect of the leverage by shortening the distance of the lever. A stiff rod will demand lots of power of the fisherman, while actually less power is put on the fish. In comparison, a deep bending rod will demand less power from the fisherman, but deliver more fighting power to the fish. In practice, this leverage effect often misleads fishermen. Often it is believed that a hard, stiff rod puts more control and power on the fish to fight, while it is actually the fish who is putting the power on the fisherman. In commercial fishing practice, big and strong fish are often just pulled in on the line itself without much effort, which is possible because the absence of the leverage effect. A rod can bend in different curves. Traditionally, the bending curve is mainly determined by its tapering. In simplified terms, a fast taper will bend a lot more in the tip area and not much in the butt part. A slow taper will tend to bend too much at the butt and delivers a weak rod. In between is what is called a progressive tapering, which loads smooth from top to butt, adding in power the deeper the rod is bent. In practice, the tapers of quality rods often are curved and/or in steps to achieve the right action and bending curve for the type of fishing a rod is built. In today's practice, different fibers with different properties can be used in a single rod. In this practice, there is no straight relationship anymore between the actual tapering and a bending curve. The bending curve isn't easily described by terms. However, some rod and amp blank manufacturers try to simplify things towards the customers by describing the bending curve by associating them with their action. The term fast action is used for rods where only the tip is bending, and slow action for rods bending from tip to butt. In practice, this is misleading, as top-quality rods are very often fast-action rods, bending from tip to butt, while the so-called fast-action rods are in fact stiff rods which end in a soft to slow tip section. The construction of a progressive bending, fast-action rod is more difficult and more expensive to achieve. Common terms to describe the bending curve are properties which influence the bending curve are progressive taper, loading curve, bending, fast taper, heavy progressive tip action, broom action. A parabolic action is often used to note a progressive bending curve. In fact, this term comes from a series of stick and fly rods built by Pezon and Amp Michel in France since the late 1930s, which had a progressive bending curve. Sometimes the term parabolic is more specific, used to note the specific type of progressive bending curve as was found in the parabolic series. A common way today to describe a rod's bending properties is the common sense system. The bending curve determines the way a rod builds up and releases its power. This influences not only the casting and the fish fighting properties, but also the sensitivity to strikes when fishing lures, the ability to set a hook, the control over the lure bait, the way the rod should be handled and how the power is distributed over the rod. On a full progressive rod, the power is distributed most evenly over the whole rod. Line weight. A rod is usually also classified by the optimal weight of fishing line, or in the case of fly rods, fly line the rod should handle. Fishing line weight is described in pounds of tensile force before the line parts. Line weight for a rod is expressed as a range that the rod is designed to support. Fly rod weights are typically expressed as a number from 1 to 12, written as NWT, and each weight represents a standard weight in grains for the first 30 feet of the fly line established by the American Fishing Tackle Manufacturing Association. For example, the first 30 feet of a 6WT fly line should weigh between 152 to 168 grains, with the optimal weight being 160 grains. In casting and spinning rods, designations such as 8 to 15 pound line are typical. Lure weight. A rod may also be described by the weight of lure hook that the rod is designed to support. Lure weight is usually expressed in ounces or grams. Number of pieces. Rods that are one piece from butt to tip are considered to have the most natural feel, and are preferred by many, though the difficulty in transporting them safely becomes an increasing problem with increasing rod length. Two-piece rods, joined by a ferrule pull, are very common, and if well engineered, sacrifice very little in the way of natural feel. Some fishermen feel a difference in sensitivity with two-piece rods, but most do not. Some rods are joined through a metal bus. These add mass to the rod, which helps in setting the hook and help activating the rod from tip to butt when casting, resulting in a better casting experience. Some anglers experience this kind of fitting as superior to a one-piece rod. They are found on specialized hand-built rods. Apart from adding the correct mass depending on the kind of rod, this fitting also is the strongest known fitting, but also the most expensive one. For that reason they are almost never to be found on commercial fishing rods.